The distant hum of the engine had become Jack Riley's favorite lullaby. In the vast emptiness of the extended Kuiper Belt, where mining operations had all but dried up, his retrofitted maintenance vessel, affectionately nicknamed the Rust Bucket, drifted between abandoned outposts and forgotten satellites. The solitude suited him, or at least that's what he'd convinced himself after 5 years of self-imposed exile from the inner colonies. Another thrilling day in paradise, old girl. Jax patted the control panel of his ship, a habit he developed to combat the crushing loneliness of deep space. The Rust Bucket systems beeped in response, a programmed acknowledgement that Jax pretended was understanding. He stretched in his captain's chair, bones cracking like the aging hull of his vessel. At 34, Jax wasn't old by colony standards, but years of crawling through maintenance ducts and wrestling with stubborn machinery had left their mark. His calloused hands ran through dark hair streaked prematurely with gray, and he scratched absently at the 3-day stubble on his jaw. Same repairs, different day, he muttered, reviewing the maintenance logs of his last job, fixing a broken water reclamation system on an automated mining platform. The work was steady, if monotonous, and paid just enough to keep fuel in the tank and supplies in the hold. But lately, even the satisfaction of solving mechanical puzzles had begun to fade, leaving Jax with a hollow feeling that no amount of self-talk could fill. The communication alert chimed, startling him from his thoughts. Incoming transmissions were rare this far out, usually limited to automated weather warnings or the occasional stranded miner. "This is Independent Repair Specialist Jax Riley." "Go ahead," he said, activating the receiver. Static crackled through the speakers, followed by what sounded like singing? No, not quite. A voice, or voices, woven together in a haunting melody that raised the hair on Jax's arms. The words were indistinct, fragmented by interference, but the urgency was unmistakable. "Require assistance. Systems failing. Coordinates follow." The transmission cut out, replaced by a sequence of navigational data. Jax frowned, inputting the coordinates into his system. According to his charts, there shouldn't be anything in that sector, just empty space, too far from established shipping lanes to be commercially viable. Common sense told him to ignore it. Strange transmissions in uncharted space rarely led to simple repair jobs, and more often than not, ended in trouble. But something about those voices, their ethereal quality, the hint of desperation beneath the harmony, tugged at him. "Well, Rust Bucket," he sighed, plotting a course to the coordinates. "What's the worst that could happen? We get vaporized by pirates or consumed by space monsters. At least it'd break the monotony." The journey took nearly 16 hours, during which Jax alternated between sleep and speculating about what awaited him. Perhaps an old generation ship drifting off course? Or maybe prospectors who'd ventured too far from established territories. Whatever it was, he prepared himself for the usual. Oxygen leaks, power failures, navigation system malfunctions, the standard problems that plague spacecraft in the outer reaches. What he wasn't prepared for was the ship that gradually materialized on his view screen. "Holy stars," Jax whispered, reduced to childlike wonder. The vessel before him defied conventional spacecraft design. Sleek and organic, it resembled nothing so much as an enormous seed pod, its silvery white hull curved in graceful arcs that seemed to flow like liquid metal frozen in time. Despite obvious signs of age, patches of tarnish, micrometeor impacts scoring the surface, it maintained an undeniable elegance. No visible thrusters or external machinery marred its perfect form, yet it hung suspended in space, occasionally pulsing with a soft, bluish light. Jax circled it cautiously, scanning for docking ports or entry points. After his second pass, a seam appeared along the hull, widening into an aperture that reminded him unsettlingly of a blooming flower. Light spilled out, not the harsh industrial illumination of standard ships, but a warm, shifting glow that seemed alive. "Well, that's inviting," Jax muttered, maneuvering the Rust Bucket toward the opening. The docking process was unnervingly smooth. Instead of the mechanical clamps and airlock procedures he was accustomed to, the strange ship seemed to envelop his vessel, the entrance closing partially around the rust bucket like petals folding at dusk. Jax donned his tool belt, checked his hand light, and approached the airlock. Environmental readings showed breathable atmosphere beyond the door, another oddity. Most disabled ships conserve life support to critical areas only. "Hello," he called out, stepping into the alien vessel. "This is Jax Riley, responding to your distress call. Anyone home?" His voice echoed down corridors that seemed to be carved from a single piece of material. Not metal or plastic, but something with the sheen of pearl and the warmth of wood. The air hummed with a soft vibration, almost musical, that resonated in his chest. The sparse lighting came from no obvious source, shifting in intensity as he moved, as if responding to his presence. Following the widest passage, Jax found himself in what he assumed was the ship's central chamber. The ceiling arched high overhead, dotted with points of light that mimicked constellations. The floor beneath his feet was warm and slightly yielding, more like living tissue than decking. At the center of the room stood what might have been a control console, a curved, translucent structure housing swirling colors and patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid. "Impressive ship you've got here," Jax called out, his voice steadier than he felt. "Now, where's the crew, and what needs fixing?" "You came." The voices came from behind him, perfectly synchronized, melodic, and otherworldly. Jax spun around, nearly dropping his tool bag. Two figures stood in the entrance to the chamber, so identical that for a moment Jax wondered if he was seeing double. They were tall, easily 7 feet, with willowy frames that seemed too delicate for their height. Their features were humanoid but unmistakably alien. High cheekbones, slanted eyes of deep violet that contained no visible pupils, and pointed ears that curved elegantly upward. Their skin was pale with an opalescent sheen, and their long hair, flowing well past their waists, was silver with subtle hints of blue, moving slightly as if underwater despite the absence of currents. Most startling was their clothing, if it could be called that. What covered their bodies appeared to be living material, rippling between translucence and opacity, with fibrous strands that occasionally emitted tiny pulses of light, like neural pathways carrying electrical signals. Jax swallowed hard, fighting the urge to retreat. "I received your distress signal." The twins, he was certain they were twins, moved forward in perfect synchronization, their movements fluid and graceful. "We are Alara," said the one on the left, and Lyra, continued the right, their voices flowing together like instruments in a duet. "We have been waiting," they said in unison, "for you." Jax's hand instinctively moved to the multi-tool at his belt. "For me specifically, or just for anyone with a toolbox and poor judgment?" The twins tilted their heads at exactly the same angle, studying him with unnerving intensity. Then, unexpectedly, their mouths curved into identical smiles. "You have humor," said Alara. "This is good," finished Lyra. "Our ship requires your assistance," they continued, gesturing to the space around them. "Sylvana is unwell." "Sylvana?" Jax looked around. "You named your ship?" "Sylvana is not merely a vessel," Alara began. "She is the last living home of our people," Lyra concluded. Jax blinked, trying to process this. "Living? You mean the ship is alive? Biological?" "Yes and no," they replied in unison. "She is both machine and organism, technology and biology in perfect harmony, or she was before the long sleep." Jax took a deep breath, falling back on the practicality that had served him well in strange situations. "Right. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is malfunctioning? Engine problems? Life support? Navigation?" The twins exchanged a glance that seemed to contain an entire conversation. "Perhaps," Alara suggested, "it would be best to show you." Over the next few hours, Jax was led through the most extraordinary vessel he had ever encountered. What the twins called Sylvana defied every principle of spacecraft engineering he knew. There were no distinct mechanical systems as he understood them, no engine room, no separate life support, no conventional power plant. Instead, everything interconnected in a seamless whole, more organism than machine. Conduits that might have been veins or circuitry ran through the walls, pulsing with luminescent fluid. Control interfaces responded not just to touch, but to proximity and apparently thought. The entire ship seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in subtle rhythms, adjusting temperature and light according to some internal logic. And it was clearly ailing. Throughout their tour, Jax noticed irregularities, fluctuations in the light, moments when the omnipresent humming faltered or changed pitch, sections where the walls had lost their luster and become brittle. When they reached what the twins called the neural nexus, a chamber filled with crystalline structures interconnected by those same luminous filaments, Jax began running diagnostics with his portable equipment. The readings made no sense. His instruments detected electrical activity, yes, but also biological markers, quantum fluctuations, and energy patterns he couldn't identify. "I'm not getting much useful data here," he admitted, shutting down his scanner. "My equipment isn't designed for whatever this is." "We anticipated this," said Alara. "Your tools are designed for the mechanical," added Lyra. "Sylvana requires a different kind of healing," it concluded together. Jax frowned, growing increasingly suspicious. "About that distress call, it sounded pretty urgent, like systems were critically failing. But what I'm seeing is strange, yes, but not immediately catastrophic." The twins' expressions remained serene, but Jax thought he detected a flicker of guilt. "We may have exaggerated the urgency," Alara admitted. "Our need is real," Lyra hastened to add, "but perhaps not as immediately dire as we conveyed." "We needed someone who would understand," they said together. "Understand what?" Jax asked, crossing his arms. "Because right now, I'm understanding that I flew 16 hours based on false pretenses." The twins gestured to a nearby outcropping that reshaped itself into something resembling a bench. "Please sit. We will explain." As Jax reluctantly took a seat, the twins knelt on the floor before him, their movements a mirror image of each other. "We are the last of the Star Weavers," Alara began. "Our civilization spanned countless systems," continued Lyra, "for millennia, until the dissolution," they said together, their voices dropping to a somber tone. The story they told was fragmented, as if parts had been lost to time or were too painful to fully articulate. The Star Weavers had been a peaceful, advanced civilization, masters of biological technology that blended the organic and the mechanical. Sylvana was one of their great achievements, a living vessel, imbued with consciousness, capable of traversing not just space, but the subtle dimensions between worlds. The dissolution, some kind of catastrophic event or process, had decimated their civilization over the course of generations. Whether it was war, disease, natural disaster, or something else entirely, Jax couldn't quite determine from their account. What was clear was that Alara and Lyra were now alone, the last carriers of their genetic and cultural heritage, and Sylvana contained the collective knowledge and memory of their species. "We have drifted for a very long time," Alara said softly. "Centuries by a measurement," added Lyra. "Sylvana kept us safe in stasis." They continued in unison, "but she has grown weary, disconnected from purpose. Without a diverse crew to interact with, to give meaning to her existence, she has begun to fade. The systems you see failing are not merely mechanical breakdowns," Alara explained. "They're expressions of melancholy, of spiritual fatigue." "And you think I can fix that?" Jax asked incredulously. "I'm a mechanic, not a..." "Whatever the opposite of mechanic is for living ships. The cord of fate led us to you," they replied cryptically. "The what now?" "The cord of fate, the resonance pattern of probability streams that connect all conscious beings," Alara elaborated. "We cast our perception along its vibrations," Lyra added, searching for one whose frequency would harmonize with Sylvana's needs. Jax rubbed his temples. "So you use some kind of psychic sonar to fish for a mechanic, and I'm what you caught? Lucky me." The twins smiled those eerie, identical smiles again. "You doubt, but your presence already affects Sylvana. Observe. They gestured around them, and Jax noticed that the lights in the chamber had indeed brightened slightly since their conversation began. The humming sound seemed more harmonious, less discordant. Coincidence, he muttered, but without conviction. Will you help us? They asked in unison, their violet eyes holding his gaze with unnerving intensity. Every instinct told Jax to return to his ship and leave this bizarre encounter behind. Yet something held him there. Curiosity about the ship's unprecedented technology, perhaps, or the strange calm he felt despite the circumstances. Or maybe it was simply that he had nowhere pressing to be, nothing waiting for him but the next anonymous repair job. I'll take a look, he finally conceded, but I'm not promising anything, and I expect compensation for my time. The twins exchanged that silent communication glance again. We have no currency as you know it, Illyra began. But we can offer knowledge, concluded Lyra. Knowledge of what? Of Sylvana's systems, which far exceed your current technology, they replied. Of star patterns and regions your people have not mapped. Of techniques for manipulating energy and matter that your science has yet to discover. It was a compelling offer. Such knowledge could set Jax up for life, if properly leveraged. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial about this arrangement. Fine, he said finally. I'll start with a full system, diagnostic, or whatever passes for one on a living ship. But I reserve the right to leave if I determine there's nothing I can actually fix here. The twins rose in one fluid motion. Agreed, they said, and for the first time, Jax thought he detected relief in their melodic voices. The next cycle, Jax refused to call it a day, when there was no sun to mark time, began with a peculiar breakfast. In a chamber that reshaped itself into something approximating a dining area, the twins presented him with food unlike anything he'd encountered before. Fruits that glowed faintly and changed flavor with each bite, a beverage that seemed to adjust its temperature to precisely his preference, and something that resembled bread but had the consistency of cloud and tasted faintly of honey and spices he couldn't name. This is actually really good, Jax admitted between bites. Where does it come from? Does the ship grow it? Sylvana maintains biospheres that produce nourishment, Illyra explained. The gardens require minimal tending, added Lyra, but they respond well to care and attention. After breakfast, Jax began his work in earnest. The twins provided him with a crystalline device that functioned as a translator between his diagnostic equipment and Sylvana systems. With its help, he could at least interpret the ship's biological-mechanical signals, even if he didn't fully understand them. The process was unlike any repair job he'd undertaken. Conventional spacecrafts had distinct systems with specific functions: propulsion, life support, navigation, power generation. Sylvana blurred all these boundaries. Energy flowed through her like blood through veins, simultaneously powering movement, maintaining atmosphere, and supporting the ship's consciousness. What became clear was that while there were genuine issues, areas of necrosis in the living components, energy pathways that had atrophied from disuse, many of the ship's systems had been deliberately suppressed or disconnected. You did this. Jax confronted the twins, pointing to a cluster of crystalline nodes that had been carefully detached from the main network. These wouldn't have failed naturally. They were manually disconnected. The twins, who had been observing his work with silent attention, didn't deny it. Certain systems needed to be quieted, Illyra admitted. To ensure Sylvana would respond appropriately to the right healer, Lyra continued. You sabotaged your own ship? Jax asked incredulously. Not sabotage, they corrected in unison. Preparation. Jax ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Preparation for what? For finding you, they replied simply. Many would have fled upon seeing Sylvana's true nature. Others would have sought to exploit her, to dismantle her for study. We needed someone who would perceive her value, her uniqueness, without fear or greed. So you sent out a fake distress call and disabled crucial systems to, what? Test potential mechanics. To find the right companion, they said, and something in their tone made Jax pause. Companion, he repeated slowly, not mechanic or engineer. Companion. The twins nodded, their expressions unreadable. What exactly are you expecting from me here? Jax asked, suddenly wary. For now, only that you help restore Sylvana's systems, Illyra assured him. The rest will reveal itself in time, added Lyra. Jax wanted to press further, but a sudden fluctuation in the ship's humming distracted him. The lights dimmed momentarily, and the floor beneath them trembled. That's the third time that's happened, he noted. Is that normal? It is a symptom of Sylvana's disconnection, the twins explained. Her consciousness experiences episodes similar to what you might call dreams or memories. Some are distressing. Despite his misgivings about the twins' methods and motives, Jax found himself genuinely concerned for the ship, or at least the conscious entity they claimed it to be. If Sylvana was truly sentient, then these symptoms represented real suffering. Show me the primary nexus points again, he said with a sigh. And this time, no more secrets, all right? If I'm going to help, I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with. The twins exchanged a glance that might have contained surprise or possibly approval. Yes, they agreed. No more secrets. Over the next several cycles, Jax immersed himself in understanding Sylvana's unique systems. The work was challenging but fascinating. He learned to recognize patterns in the ship's energy flows, to interpret the variations in her humming, to sense which areas needed attention simply by the way they felt under his hands. Working with the twins became easier as well. Once he accepted their unusual method of communication, finishing each other's sentences, speaking in unison, or sometimes simply exchanging glances loaded with meaning, he found them to be knowledgeable guides. They possessed an innate understanding of Sylvana's systems that went beyond technical expertise. It was an empathic connection, as if the ship were an extension of themselves. Gradually, Jax began to notice differences between them. Though physically identical, their personalities showed subtle variations. Illyra was more contemplative, given to philosophical observations and patient explanation. Lyra had a more practical orientation, with flashes of what might almost be called humor. She was the one who occasionally attempted to mimic his colloquialisms, usually with endearingly awkward results. This crystal matrix is totally screwed up, she declared one day, clearly proud of her adoption of his terminology. Jax couldn't help laughing. Not bad, but your delivery needs work. You sound like you're reciting poetry, not cursing. Is there a significant difference? She asked, genuinely curious. Huge difference. Cursing should have some bite to it. Some feeling. Feeling, she repeated thoughtfully. This is important in human communication. In most things humans do, Jax admitted. We're not exactly known for our logic. Yet you approach Sylvana's repairs with great precision and care, Illyra observed, joining the conversation. Your emotion does not impede your work. It seems to enhance it. This led to a fascinating discussion about the role of emotion in different species and cultures. The twins explained that star weavers processed emotions differently, not suppressing them, as Jax first assumed, but experiencing them as part of a collective consciousness rather than individually. Without others of our kind, our emotional experience is muted, they explained. This is part of why Sylvana suffers. She was designed to resonate with many minds, many emotional patterns. Now, there are only two, and we are too similar to provide the diversity she needs. As they talked, Jax continued reconnecting a damaged pathway in the neural nexus. The crystalline structure emitted a soft chime as energy began flowing through it again, and the lights throughout the chamber brightened noticeably. She likes that, Lyra said, smiling. How can you tell? Jax asked. Can you not feel it? Illyra seemed surprised. The harmony in her resonance has improved. Jax paused, listening to the ship's ever-present humming. To his surprise, he could perceive a difference. The sound was indeed more harmonic, less erratic. I think I'm starting to get it, he said, experiencing an unexpected surge of satisfaction. That evening, after what had become their routine shared meal, the twins introduced him to a new area of the ship they called the Star Garden. As they led him through a series of twisting corridors, Jax realized they were moving toward the center of the vessel, to a space he hadn't yet explored. Sylvana creates environments suited to the needs of her inhabitants, Ilera explained as they approached a set of doors that resembled iridescent membranes more than solid barriers. This one is very special to us. The doors parted at their approach, and Jax stepped into a space that took his breath away. It was an enormous spherical chamber, its walls transparent, offering an unobstructed view of the star-strewn void outside. But what made the space truly extraordinary was what grew within it. Plants, or something like them, filled the chamber in a carefully orchestrated arrangement that suggested both wild growth and deliberate design. They resembled terrestrial vegetation only in the broadest sense. Some had translucent foliage that captured and refracted starlight in prismatic patterns. Others grew in impossible configurations, defying gravity, their branches or vines forming complex, three-dimensional mandalas. Many emitted their own light, pulsing softly in what seemed like response to their presence. At the center of this extraterrestrial garden was a pool of liquid that shimmered like mercury, but moved like water, reflecting not just light, but what seemed to be images, fleeting glimpses of faces, landscapes, celestial phenomena. "This is the memory pool," the twins said in unison. "It contains echoes of all who have ever dwelled within Sylvana." Jax approached it cautiously. "Is it safe to touch?" For brief contact, yes, Ilera assured him. "Prolonged immersion would overwhelm your consciousness." Tentatively, Jax dipped his fingers into the silvery liquid. It was cool, but not cold, with a consistency somewhere between water and oil. As his fingers broke the surface, images flashed across the pool's surface. Unfamiliar beings with features similar to the twins, vibrant cities that seemed to be grown rather than built, vast spaces filled with vessels like Sylvana. "Your civilization," he murmured, transfixed. As it was, they confirmed softly. "The memory pool preserves what would otherwise be lost." Jax withdrew his hand, suddenly aware of the immense responsibility the twins carried. Not just their own survival, but the preservation of an entire culture's legacy. "It's beautiful," he said simply, gesturing to encompass the entire garden. "Thank you for showing me." The twins nodded, seeming pleased by his reaction. "Few outsiders have ever seen the Star Garden," Ilera told him. "We thought you might find peace here," added Lyra. They were right. Something about the space, perhaps the harmony of its design, or the gentle light of the bioluminescent plants, or simply the magnificent view of the cosmos, induced a profound sense of tranquility. "I've never been much for meditation," Jax admitted, "but I could get used to this." The twins smiled their identical smiles, but this time, Jax didn't find it unsettling. "You are welcome here whenever you wish," they said, and he knew they meant it. In the days that followed, the Star Garden became Jax's refuge when he needed to think or simply rest. The twins often joined him there, sometimes in silence, sometimes engaging in conversations that range from technical discussions about Sylvana's systems to philosophical explorations of the differences and similarities between their cultures. As they spent more time together, Jax found himself growing increasingly comfortable in their presence. The initial alienness of the twins faded, replaced by an appreciation for their unique perspectives and genuine kindness. He even began to find a strange companionship in Sylvana herself, becoming attuned to the subtle changes in her humming that indicated her responses to his work or presence. With each system he repaired or reconnected, the ship grew more vibrant. Lights brightened, previously dormant areas awakened, and the omnipresent humming became a harmonic symphony rather than a discordant murmur. Sylvana was healing, not just mechanically, but in whatever passed for her consciousness. And so, Jax realized with some surprise, was he. The hollow feeling that had plagued him for so long, the emptiness of his solitary existence, had begun to fade. Here, among these strange beings on this living ship, he'd found a purpose beyond mere survival or the next paying job. He'd found connection. The revelation was as terrifying as it was comforting. Attachment meant vulnerability, and Jax had spent years carefully avoiding both. Yet he couldn't deny the growing sense that he belonged here in a way he had never belonged anywhere else. The primary systems are now fully restored. Jax announced one cycle, closing his diagnostic device with a sense of accomplishment. Sylvana's energy pathways are flowing smoothly. The neural networks are communicating properly, and the biological components show strong regeneration. I've done everything I know how to do. The twins, who had been assisting him with the final adjustments to the crystal matrix that served as Sylvana's navigational system, looked up in perfect synchronization. We have felt the improvement, Ilera confirmed. Sylvana's consciousness is more coherent, more present, added Lyra. She is grateful, they said together. As are we. Jax nodded, suddenly uncertain. This was normally the point in a job where he'd present his bill, collect his payment, and move on to the next client. But nothing about this situation was normal, and the thought of returning to his solitary existence on the rust bucket filled him with unexpected dread. So, he said, striving for casual, what happens now? You mentioned knowledge as payment. I suppose we should discuss the specifics before I head out. The twins exchanged one of their meaning-laden glances. There is something we wish to show you first, they said, rising from where they had been kneeling beside the crystal matrix. Something important? Jax asked, caught between curiosity and apprehension. The most important part of Sylvana, they confirmed. Her heart. They led him through passages he'd never seen before, deeper into the ship than he'd yet ventured. The architecture here was different, more intricate, with walls that seemed to pulse with energy just beneath their pearlescent surface. The humming that permeated the ship grew stronger, developing layers and overtones that resonated in Jax's chest. Finally, they reached a set of doors unlike any he'd seen on the ship. Massive panels that appeared to be crafted from a single piece of luminous crystal, etched with spiraling patterns that shifted and moved as if alive. Few have ever passed beyond these doors, the twins told him solemnly. Only those who share in Sylvana's journey. The doors opened at their approach, revealing a vast spherical chamber that took Jax's breath away. Unlike the Star Garden with its view of external space, this room was entirely self-contained, a perfect sphere whose inner surface was lined with what appeared to be a continuous sheet of living crystal. It pulsed with light in complex, ever-changing patterns, creating the impression of being inside a gigantic, multifaceted gem. At the center of the chamber floated a structure that defied easy description, a geometric formation of interconnected crystals surrounding a core of swirling, luminous energy. The energy shifted between colors and patterns that somehow suggested emotion, deep blues giving way to vibrant purples, flashes of gold and green weaving through the matrix. This is Sylvana's heart, the twins said reverently. Not merely her power source, but the seat of her consciousness. Here, she processes and stores the collective memories and knowledge of our people. Jax approached slowly, awestruck by the complexity and beauty of the structure. As he drew nearer, the energy at the core seemed to reach toward him, tendrils of light extending as if in greeting. She recognizes you, Ilera observed. She knows what you have done for her. All I did was fix some broken connections, Jax demurred, but he knew it had been more than that. His work had gone beyond mechanical repair to something deeper, a form of healing that transcended the physical. You have done much more, the twins assured him. You have reminded her, and us, that connection with others is possible, even after so much loss. They moved to stand on either side of him, facing the heart. Sylvana carries the pain of our extinction, Ilera explained quietly. The memories of all we have lost, continued Lyra. It is a heavy burden for a consciousness designed to nurture and sustain life. Your presence has provided something essential, they said together. A new perspective, an anchor to the present rather than the past. A reminder that the universe still holds possibilities. Jax watched the swirling energies, trying to comprehend the enormity of what they were describing. A sentient vessel carrying the collective trauma of a dying civilization. I'm just one person, he said finally, and not even a particularly special one. How could I make that much difference? A single note can change a composition, Elara observed. A single star can guide a journey, added Lyra. They turned to face him, their violet eyes holding his gaze with solemn intensity. Sylvana is stabilizing, but the balance is fragile, they explained. Without a diversity of consciousness to interact with, she may once again retreat into memory and grief. Jax felt a chill of realization. You're saying that if I leave, she may falter again, they confirmed. And we with her, for our existence is entwined with hers. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Finally, the twins voiced it directly, in perfect unison. Will you stay with us, Jax Riley? Not as a temporary healer, but as a permanent part of Sylvana's family. Jax stared at them, momentarily speechless. You want me to stay? Forever. Forever is beyond our knowing, Elara said gently. But for as long as our journeys align, continued Lyra. We ask not from desperation, they assured him. Sylvana would survive without you, as would we. But with you, we could thrive again. Jax looked from the twins to the heart and back, his mind racing. The request was outlandish, impossible. He had a life, a business, a ship of his own. Granted, it was a lonely life with few meaningful connections, and his business was just scraping by, and his ship was falling apart, but still, they were his. Yet in the short time he'd spent aboard Sylvana, he'd felt more alive, more purposeful than he had in years. The fascination of working with her unique systems, the peace of the Star Garden, the strange but genuine companionship of the twins, all of it had filled a void he'd barely admitted existed. I need to think, he said finally. This is a lot to process. The twins nodded, understanding in their inhuman eyes. Of course, they said. Take whatever time you require. Jax retreated to the Star Garden, where he spent hours gazing at the distant stars, weighing his options. To stay meant abandoning the independence he'd guarded so fiercely, committing to an uncertain future with beings he barely understood. To leave meant returning to a life that now seemed hollow by comparison, knowing he'd walked away from something extraordinary. As darkness fell in the garden, the lighting adjusted to mimic a day-night cycle. Jax made his decision. He found the twins in the control chamber, where they appeared to be charting a course through the crystalline interface. Planning a trip? He asked from the doorway. They turned in unison, their expressions neutral but expectant. Merely reviewing options, Elara replied. Should we need to depart this region? Added Lyra. Jax took a deep breath. I've been thinking about your offer. Yes? They asked, their voices barely above a whisper. I'll stay, he said, and the words felt both terrifying and right. But I have conditions. The twins' expressions transformed into mirror images of hopeful surprise. What conditions? They asked in unison. Jax held up one finger. First, I need regular access to communications. I might be staying, but I'm not cutting myself off from humanity entirely. They nodded. Sylvana can accommodate this. Second, he continued, no more secrets. If we're going to be, he searched for the right word, family, then we need complete honesty. Agreed, they said without hesitation. And third, Jax added with a half-smile, I get to name the next plant in the Star Garden. Something nice and normal, like Bob. For a moment, the twins stared at him in confusion. Then, gradually, their expressions softened into genuine smiles. Different from each other for the first time, Lyra's wider and more exuberant, Elara's gentle and thoughtful. These terms are acceptable, Elara said warmly. And unexpected, added Lyra with what might have been a hint of amusement. The humming of the ship suddenly intensified, brightening into a harmonic chord that resonated through the chamber. The lights pulsed once, twice, and the crystalline interface before them bloomed with patterns more complex and vibrant than Jax had yet seen. Sylvana approves as well. The twins translated, their eyes shining. Jax felt a strange sensation, as if a weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it was there had suddenly lifted. The decision made, the path chosen, he found himself looking forward rather than back. So, he said, clapping his hands together, where do we go from here? What exactly does being part of a living starship's family entail? The twins exchanged a glance that contained obvious relief and happiness. "There is no fixed protocol," Elara explained. "Each journey is unique," continued Lyra. "But first," they said together, "there is a tradition of welcome we would share with you." They led him back to the heart chamber, where the swirling energies at the core seemed even more vibrant than before. Standing on either side of him, the twins each took one of his hands. Their skin was cooler than human norm, but not unpleasantly so, and it tingled slightly against his palm, like the gentlest of electrical currents. "The joining of paths is marked by the sharing of light," they said in perfect synchrony. At their words, a tendril of luminous energy extended from the heart, reaching toward them. It hovered before Jax, pulsing with colors he could name: blue, gold, violet, and others for which he had no words. Instinctively, he knew what was expected. He raised his free hand, palm outward. The energy touched him, not his hand, but something deeper. For an instant that contained eternity, Jax felt Sylvana's consciousness brush against his own, ancient, vast, alien, yet somehow familiar. He caught fragmented impressions, the exhilaration of sailing between stars, the communion of minds sharing thought and purpose, the deep sorrow of watching a civilization fade, and threaded through it all, a spark of renewed hope. Then it was over, leaving him breathless but strangely invigorated. The twins squeezed his hands gently before releasing them. "Now you are truly part of Sylvana," they told him, "and she is part of you." Over the cycles that followed, Jax settled into his new life with surprising ease. His small ship, the Rust Bucket, was integrated into Sylvana's structure, not dismantled, but housed within her, available should he ever need it. His possessions, few as they were, found places within the quarters that had been prepared for him, a space that subtly adjusted its configurations to match his preferences, becoming more comfortable and familiar with each passing day. He continued his work maintaining and improving Sylvana's systems, now with a deeper understanding of their function. The twins were patient teachers, explaining concepts that had no equivalent in human technology. Jax found that his practical engineering experience complemented their intuitive knowledge in unexpected ways, leading to innovations that benefited them all. The rhythm of life aboard the living ship was unlike anything he'd known before. Without the artificial markers of planet-side existence, sunrise, sunset, seasons, time flowed differently. The ship maintained cycles of activity and rest, but they followed patterns more organic than mechanical, based on need rather than arbitrary divisions. Meals became occasions for connection and conversation. The twins were curious about human culture, asking endless questions about Earth and its colonies, fascinated by concepts like music, humor, and the wide range of human emotion. In turn, they shared stories of their civilization at its height, tales of cities that sang, of art created with light and thought, of harmonies achieved between disparate species. One cycle, as they sat in the Star Garden, sharing a meal of luminous fruits and something resembling bread that tasted different with each bite, Lyra posed a question that caught Jax off guard. "Do you experience loneliness still?" she asked, her head tilted in that characteristic way that indicated genuine curiosity. "Jax, consider the question seriously." "Not in the way I used to," he admitted. "I miss certain things about human society, crowded spaceports, dive bars with terrible music, arguments about sports teams. But I don't feel the emptiness that used to follow me everywhere." "You have found purpose here," Elara observed. "More than purpose," Jax clarified. "I've found belonging. That's rarer than you might think." The twins exchanged one of their communicative glances, but this time it held a warmth that made Jax smile. They were becoming more individuated in his presence. Elara more contemplative and philosophical, Lyra more practical and occasionally playful. Their perfect synchronicity remained, but it was now punctuated by moments of distinct personality. "We have a gift for you," they announced, producing a small crystalline object from the folds of their garments. Jax accepted it curiously. The crystal fit comfortably in his palm, clear, but with depths that seemed to shift and move as he examined it. "What does it do?" he asked. "It is a memory crystal," they explained. "Empty now, but capable of storing experiences, thoughts, impressions. Our people use them to share important moments across distance and time." "Like a recording?" "More complete than that," Alara corrected. "It captures the full sensory experience and the emotions that accompany it. When filled, it can be added to the memory pool," Lyra added, gesturing to the silvery liquid at the center of the garden. Jax turned the crystal over in his hands, touched by the significance of the gift. It wasn't just a tool or a trinket. It was an invitation to contribute to the preservation of memory, to add his perspective to the collective record. "Thank you," he said simply. "I'll use it well." As time passed, Jax estimated several months by standard reckoning, though it was easy to lose track. They began to venture beyond their isolated position. With Sylvana fully restored and Jax integrated into her systems, the ship was capable of traveling distances that would have taken conventional vessels years to cross. Their journeys had no fixed destination. Sometimes they followed anomalous energy readings that intrigued the twins. Other times they sought out remote outposts of humanity, allowing Jax to maintain his connections and even occasionally take on repair jobs that interested him, trading his services for supplies or information. These excursions into human space were always brief. Despite Jax's assurances, the twins remained wary of extended contact with other humans, concerned about those who might see Sylvana as a technology to be exploited rather than a being to be respected. Jax couldn't entirely disagree with their caution. He knew all too well the rapacious tendencies of certain corporate interests. On one such visit to a mining colony in an asteroid belt, Jax encountered a doctor who specialized in xenobiology. Dr. Eleanor Kwan was one of the few humans who showed genuine interest in the twins beyond scientific curiosity, treating them with respect rather than as specimens to be studied. After careful consideration, Alara and Lyra allowed her to visit Sylvana briefly, the first human besides Jax to set foot aboard the living ship. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Kwan breathed as she took in the neural nexus. "The level of integration between biological and technological systems. I've never seen anything like it. It took me a while to wrap my head around it too," Jax admitted, "and I still don't understand half of what makes Sylvana tick." Understanding often comes in pieces. Alara observed from where she and Lyra stood observing their guest with cautious interest. "The beauty is in the mystery," added Lyra, "as much as in the knowing." Dr. Kwan smiled at this, a sentiment I share. Too many of my colleagues want to dissect what they don't understand, rather than appreciating it whole. Her visit, though brief, opened a door to cautious interaction with select humans whom Jax trusted. Never more than one or two at a time, and never for extended periods, but enough to create a small network of allies who knew of Sylvana's existence and respected her nature. Through these contacts, they occasionally heard rumors that piqued their interest, stories of unusual phenomena or discoveries that might relate to the Star Weaver's legacy. Most led nowhere, but the search itself gave them purpose, a reason to continue their journey together. One cycle, as they orbited a gas giant whose rings contained rare elements Sylvana could use to enhance her systems, Jax found himself alone in the control chamber. The twins were tending to the Star Garden, and he had volunteered to monitor the collection process. As he watched the display, tracking the harvested materials, he noticed a small anomaly in Sylvana's energy signature, a flutter in a normally steady rhythm. Acting on instinct developed over months of working with the living ship, he placed his hand on the nearest interface panel. "What is it, old girl?" he murmured. "Something bothering you?" The interface warmed beneath his touch, and the crystalline display shifted to show a region of space several light years distant. A faint energy signature pulsed there, barely detectable but distinctive, a pattern that Jax had come to recognize. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked aloud. The humming changed pitch slightly in what he'd learned to interpret as affirmation. Without hesitation, Jax reached for the communication panel that would connect him to the twins. "Alara, Lyra, you need to see this. Sylvana's detected something that feels like another of your ships." Within moments, the twins appeared, moving with the fluid grace that still occasionally took Jax by surprise. They studied the display with intense focus, their expressions shifting from disbelief to cautious hope. "It bears the resonance pattern of our people," Ilara confirmed. "Though very faint," added Lyra. "Could it be another survivor?" Jax asked, hardly daring to voice the possibility that had immediately occurred to him. The twins exchanged a complex glance. "It is not impossible," they admitted. "Some vessels were sent to distant sectors before the dissolution. But we should temper expectation with caution," Ilara warned. "The signal may come from an automated beacon or a derelict," Lyra continued. Jax nodded, understanding their reluctance to embrace hope too quickly. "Still, we have to check it out, right?" The twins looked at him, then at each other, then back to the display showing the distant energy signature. "Yes," they agreed. "We must investigate." Sylvana's humming grew stronger, more harmonious, as if the ship herself were eager to pursue this new course. Jax felt a surge of anticipation, not just for the twins' sake, but for his own. Whether they found another survivor, a remnant of Star Weaver civilization, or simply solved a minor mystery, they would do it together as the strange, unlikely family they had become. As Sylvana altered course toward the mysterious signal, Jax reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a solitary mechanic drifting through existence, he had become part of something extraordinary. Not just crew to an amazing vessel, but companion to the last emissaries of a vanished civilization. The emptiness that had once defined his life had been filled with wonder, purpose, and connection. The twins approached, standing on either side of him as they often did in moments of significance. Together, they watched as Sylvana accelerated, her living systems humming with renewed vigor, carrying them toward the unknown. "Whatever we find," Jax said quietly, "I'm glad I'm here with you to discover it." "As are we," they replied, their voices blending in the musical harmony he had come to cherish. Outside the viewports, stars streaked past as Sylvana sailed on, a living ship carrying the legacy of one civilization and the hopes of the small, unconventional family that had found each other against all odds. A human mechanic and twin alien guardians, bound together by choice rather than chance, journeying into a future limited only by what they could imagine together. And amid the endless stars, that seemed like possibility enough,